Okay, I'm going to tell you about Australia and what developments we've had recently in the last year in advertising and marketing law. Just a snapshot of what I'm going to talk about. Number of cases, the ACCC, which is our regulatory authority in Australia for competition and consumer affairs. The ACCC case versus Meriton is a manipulation of online review case. ACCC v Snowdale is a case involving the claim of free range with chickens. And then I'm going to talk about the ACCC and Valve Corporation appeal, which is a case I've talked about previously. And then I'm going to talk very briefly, the ANA code update. There's a couple of updates there where they've changed some things. And lastly, some new country of origin food labelling requirements. So firstly, onto the Meriton case. This is pretty naughty. So Meriton Property, they basically use up serviced apartments. They basically doctored their email addresses in one of two ways that they sent to TripAdvisor for the Review Express email considerations that was looked at by TripAdvisor, and then they would give a rating back to Meriton about their property, and people would rely on those reviews. So they did it in one of two ways. They either changed the email address of the customer, and these were customers that they thought were going to give a negative review and had either experienced a service failure or had complained during their stay, so that by amending their email addresses, they never got the email from TripAdvisor, or alternatively, they never gave the email address to TripAdvisor to send the Review Express email to the customer. As a result, they got found to have engaged in misleading deceptive conduct, and there's a hearing later on this year on the 25th of June for remedies, and you'll see up there that those are the sort of remedies they're seeking, and they'll probably get all of those. The question will be how much is the amount of the pecuniary penalty. And having read some of the emails that was in that case, I suspect it'll be quite significant. Snowdale, we've had the free range, or the egg wars, as we're calling them in Australia, where people have been using the phrase free range, and the question is whether or not they're really free range, and what does free range actually mean. This company was fined $750,000, which is the largest fine we've had in Australia for misleading deceptive conduct in relation to the free range claim. Often you'll find people who are doing, in the early days, they will be actually producing cage eggs and calling them free range. This wasn't as extreme as that, but what happened here is that they looked at the issue of what was involved in free range, and the court found that the hens in Snowdale's sheds didn't really go outside because the conditions didn't allow that, and the conditions included things like the number of pop holes, and the pop holes are the things that chickens come out of the hen coop, and also the number of birds per metre of pop hole, as well as the flock size and the shed size. And the ACCC has since produced some guidelines saying that the meaning of free range suggests that a significant number of relevant consumers might reasonably understand the essential or defining characteristic of a free-range hen to be that of a hen who regularly spends time roaming outdoors in a spacious environment, which sounds very sensible to me. The next one I want to talk about is ACCC v Valve Corporation. As you might recall, this is a case where a company that's resident in the US is not resident in the state. It's got a significant online game platform called Steam, and it basically said in its customer agreements, its refund policies, as far as Australian residents were concerned, there were no refunds. Now, that is, under Australian consumer law, misleading or deceptive, because you are entitled to refunds in certain circumstances, especially if the product fails. And in this case, the computer games that these people had downloaded actually failed and didn't work, and therefore they were entitled to get the money back under our law. But Steam, or Valve I should say, took the view that, look, we're not resident in your country, we're not, and our contracts are governed by Washington state law, and the court found that they were governed by Washington state law. But the court also found that they had engaged in misleading or deceptive conduct in Australia. It's the conduct that we're talking about, not not the actual contract. So at the end of the day, they found that they were engaging in misleading deceptive conduct. They appealed, and the full court of the federal got upheld that appeal. And the last part of it is that they've now filed an application seeking special leave to our court, which is the highest court of the land. When that will be heard, I'm not sure. The next one, quickly, the ANA Code of Ethics is our code of ethics, and that is the sort of cornerstone of our self-regulatory advertising laws. And the things that they've done there is pretty straightforward. They've changed or broadened the definition of using sexual appeal in advertising by expanding it to be exploitive or degrading. It used to be exploitive and degrading. And they've also brought in the clearly distinguishable advertising guidelines. The country of origin labelling I just wanted to quickly talk about was that we have a standard that was brought in 2016. There's been a 2-year period for that to come into play. And basically you've got priority and non-priority foods, and from the 1st of July 2018, this is going to kick in. This is when it will become obligatory. The non-priority foods includes things like confectionery, snacks, alcohol beverages, soft drinks, sports drinks, bottled water, seasonings, tea and coffee, all the good things in life. And the priority foods are everything else. And the priority foods are the ones that have got the stricter labelling requirements, which is that label there. You've got to have that. If you want to use that Australian logo, you've got to have that Australian kangaroo symbol. You've got to have a bar that shows a percentage of Australian ingredients, and you've got to have a text that describes that bar chart and the country of origin. Thank you.